A lot of people seem to really hate this film. A lot of people seem to sort of just kind of like it. I don't think anybody like absolutely really loves it. I'm kind of in between. I think there's a lot of stuff in this film that I really hate, and there's also a lot of stuff where I can sort of see, yeah, this film does have a lot of stuff in it to like, but it's certainly not a good film by any means. Before I've even seen this film has a strike against me, because it's basically trying to be two things here. It's trying to be a sequel to Jurassic Park, but at the same time it's trying to be a sort of a very loose adaptation of the early 20th century novel, The Lost World, not only in a very sort of basic sense of the title and the fact that it's about an island with dinosaurs on it. That's really where the sort of similarities to the novel end. I haven't read the book, but from what I've read, that seems to be it. So I think they've made a mistake really with the title here, because you assume from the title that for the most part it's going to be an adaptation of the novel, and it's just not. It's just an island with dinosaurs on it, and they figured, ooh, let's give it a bit more relevance because of that and call it The Lost World. It's not really. It's just a sequel to Jurassic Park, really. And I think that's the best way to look at this film. Forget about the novel and just look at this as a sequel to Jurassic Park, because that's obviously the main thing that will draw people in and make people want to see this film, because obviously Jurassic Park was fantastic, and you just want to see a sequel to it. It's the sort of thing to sucker in the mainstream audience. But as a sequel to Jurassic Park, this doesn't really work. For one thing, there's no Alan Grant. The kids are in it for, I think, about a minute, and that's it. And those are the two things that made the first film so great. Those characters that we were with basically for 90% of the film. Following them and wanting to see them pull through and do everything. And in this film, they focus on Ian Malcolm, and what did he do in the first film? He was just irritating for the most part. I think John Hammond basically put it best about Ian Malcolm. I really, really hate that man. It annoys the fuck out of me. He's a bit more bearable in this film, I guess, because he's supposed to be the main character now. He's the protagonist, in a sense. There's a lot of sort of pointless exposition in the early stages of this film, where you're basically just establishing the fact that they're going to an island with dinosaurs on it, and it's not until about half an hour in that we get to the actual dinosaurs, and it takes way too long to just establish these basic facts. There's a whole bunch of stuff about how there's been some kind of cover-up of the events of the first film. It goes nowhere, and it's completely pointless. It's just like, the whole time I'm watching this, like, will we get to the dinosaurs at all here? There's a lot of establishing of Ian Malcolm's girlfriend, who has gone to the island without telling him. There is one line in there, to be fair, where she basically says she didn't tell him because she knew he would stop her, which is pretty obvious from the way he reacts to the fact when he finds out that she's gone. That does kind of make sense, but it also seems a bit selfish to me, because imagine, there is actually the realistic potential that she could be killed on the island by one of the dinosaurs, so kind of heartless not to tell your boyfriend about something like that. So I would still question that. I do sort of also question the way they're introducing so many new characters that we really just don't care about and know very little about. And they talk about Sarah in particular. She's mentioned, and talked about quite a lot in one of the early scenes before we've actually met her. And, they're acting like we already know her or something. And, anybody who hadn't seen the original would swear that she had been in the original film, but she's not. She's a completely new character. Here we have a sequel where one of the main characters is a character we haven't met yet. Played by Julianne Moore as well. I don't know what they were thinking with this casting. Jeff Goldblum, Julianne Moore, Vince Vaughn. This is Steven Spielberg, for Christ's sake. Could he not get anyone better than this? So basically they're going to the island. There's a whole bunch of stuff about we need to sort of contain these animals, we need to study them, and we need to look at them. I don't quite know what they're doing for the most part, but then these poachers come along and it becomes like an environmental type, don't poach the animals type film. It's not really about the dinosaurs like it was in the first film. It kind of sort of touches on the idea, dinosaurs aren't just monsters kind of aspect, which, I guess that's kind of interesting, but again, it doesn't really go anywhere. It seems more a case to be, just this more sort of generic, don't kill animals just to poach them kind of thing, and don't use the animals, just to show them off in a zoo or something. It doesn't really need to be dinosaurs, really, if you're going to do something like that. It could just be animals in general. It's Congo, for the basically, is well, that isn't also not a particularly good film, but here it's worse because we have the dinosaurs, and they're not really being used as dinosaurs, they're just being used as generic animals. But I gotta say, once we actually get to the island, things do get a little bit better. I actually, as much as I don't really like the actors of just Jeff Goldblum and Julianne Moore, I kind of like their relationship, actually, of the characters of Ian and Sarah. Their relationship seems kind of natural. I don't think they ever kiss or hug or anything like that, or anything that would indicate that they're boyfriend and girlfriend, so that's a little odd. But the dialogue between the two of them actually feels relatively natural. Ian has a daughter who was also not in the first film. You have him in the entire first film, just being there, being Ian Malcolm and being kind of annoying. And I don't know, did I miss something in the first film? Did they ever establish the fact that he has a daughter who, by the way, is also a different colour to him? Huh? When did that happen? It's supposed to be only a few years after the events of the first film, and this daughter appears to be, I think, about 12, 13, so she was obviously alive during the events of the first film. Did they ever mention that he has a daughter? The mother of this child is not Sarah, it's some other woman who is briefly mentioned in one sentence, that I think is basically her backstory. I don't even remember the character's name, actually. She's just this daughter that Ian now suddenly has. I guess maybe because the kids in the first film worked so well, they felt the need to have a kid in this one, but no, she doesn't work for me. She doesn't really do anything particularly interesting at all. She's not a particularly kind of interesting character. The only thing she does throughout the entire film that I could really sort of give her any kind of credit for is she does this kind of freaky gymnastic trick to knock a raptor out of a window. Kind of silly, but also kind of cool at the same time. Which brings me quite nicely onto probably the main, really good aspect of this film, and that is the action. The action scenes are pretty sort of engrossing and pretty tense, as they were in the first film. It probably doesn't work as well as the first film because I don't think we care about the characters quite as much, but the action scenes do work fairly well. I actually really like the scene where Sarah falls onto the sort of the glass window at the end of one of the trailers when it's hanging off the cliff, and she has to lie there for a minute or so and just wait for help while the glass is sort of cracking around her. That's a really sort of imaginative kind of not quite so much action scene, but a tense, suspenseful scene at the same time. That to me is probably one of the best bits in the film. That works really well. So there's a lot of kind of reasonably good dialogue between the characters, and there are some good action scenes in there. The effects on the dinosaurs, I don't think it's quite as good as the first film, and there are a few shots which look a little fake, but for the most part it's pretty good. So when the dinosaurs are being the dinosaurs, as opposed to just being animals that the poachers are after, it works okay. Sort of a second movie almost in the last 20 minutes of this, where the T-Rex is rampaging around San Diego. That, to me, I kind of get the feeling like it was something they wanted to do in a third film almost, but maybe the filmmakers decided that the story they had on the island was a little thin, so they just wanted to, pad it out a little bit with this 20 minutes of the T-Rex rampaging around San Diego at the very end. That, to me, actually could have worked if it had been its own film, actually. That's kind of an interesting sort of homage to Godzilla and King Kong. That was pretty cool, actually, watching it trudge around the city. But again, when I'm talking about, the good things about this film, it's just stuff that's kind of cool. It's kind of really a testament to the fact that this film really, for the most part, isn't very good. The only enjoyable parts are kind of sort of on the same level as what's enjoyable about a firework display. It's just some cool effects, it's just some cool action, it's just, dinosaurs being, kind of dinosaur-like. In terms of any kind of moral message or thought-provoking, the dialogue is okay in some parts, but for the most part, not very interesting. The basic core of the story that basically carried the original film through so well and balanced it out with the dinosaurs being cool and the action being cool. Balancing that out with the action, it works so well in the original. There's nothing like that in here. It's just some cool action and some cool effects. That is sort of enough to get you through this. That is certainly enough to say that it's not god-awful by any means. It's just that it's a sequel to a film that did that element of it so well, asking the moral questions really well. As a sequel to Jurassic Park, it kind of falls flat, but it's a fun time nonetheless. I just think it could have worked a little bit better if maybe they'd had some better actors in here, and maybe if Jeff Goldblum hadn't been the main character, because I just do not understand why Jeff Goldblum is even a character in the first film, really. I don't take any interest in what he does or what he says at all. This could have been an okay film, at least, if Alan Grant had been the main character and they brought back the kids from the first film, because that was what I would want to see from a Jurassic Park sequel, really. And they don't give us that at all. Instead, they give us Ian Malcolm and a bunch of new characters that we don't care about. The poachers, actually, I don't know if this is, intentional, but I suppose to give you maybe a kind of a two-sided argument to this idea of, poaching animals. But the poachers actually do seem to have a point in terms of some of the things they say. They don't come across as complete arseholes. They actually do come across as believable and relatively likeable characters. Pete Postlethwaite, by the way, is probably the best actor in this film, and it's a shame he has to play one of the sort of poachers who maybe doesn't get as much screen time as he deserves, really. And there just really isn't anything else I can really remember about this film that I have anything to say about. And it's, again, kind of a sign of how sort of mediocre this film is. There isn't really much to say about it. It's just some cool effects and cool action, like I've said before. Could have worked better with some better actors. Could have worked better with some better characters. Could have worked a lot better as a Jurassic Park sequel if maybe there was a more of a moral issue to it, rather than it just being some cool action and cool effects, and having Alan Grant in there. But it's not god-awful or anything. It's worth seeing if you want some cool action and cool effects, and maybe a little bit of decent dialogue between some of the characters at times. But it does waste a lot of your time with some pointless exposition. I would say skip over the first half hour. Yeah, certainly if you've seen this film before, skip over the first half hour, certainly. And then it does get a bit better. The last 20 minutes are probably worth seeing, but at the same time it's a little bit depressing at the same time, because I kind of feel that had that section of the T-Rex rampaging around San Diego, had that been a little bit longer, it actually could have made for a much better film, actually, because that was probably one of the more enjoyable parts of the film. But it's only the last 20 minutes. I don't get that. But anyway, this is kind of on the cusp of okay, on the back end of okay, I would say. Maybe about a 4 out of 10, I would say. Okay, well, I will see you guys soon for another movie review.